But let me say this. I was at a funeral a while back, and I think it's so important that the minister there had good intentions, but didn't let people grieve. And I just remember that. What's wrong with y'all?
Yeah.
Why y'all grieving? They in heaven.
Yeah.
Dude, mourn with those who mourn.
Yep.
Like, get in it with them. We understand that.
For sure.
But the reality is, what I'm learning is this: pain is a gift.
Wow.
It's a gift. The grief you feel is a gift. Why? The pain shows you how much you love someone.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, guys? How's it going? Jamin here.
Pastor Ken.
And welcome to Overtime. Overtime. This is podcast number
6.
Yes. Podcast
And
number 6.
maybe you've been thinking about why the delay. We've taken a pause for about a month or so.
Yeah.
And today we're going to talk about why some things have happened in our church.
Yeah.
And we want to have that discussion today.
Yeah, so we're going to get into it. Again, make sure that you guys are followed. Make sure that you are liking, commenting what you guys want to see. Make sure you're subscribed. And if you hit the notification bell, it helps you to know whenever we drop new videos, new podcasts, new crossover church content, okay?
Yep.
Ready to jump into it?
Let's get into it.
So, something kind of happened in our church.
Yeah.
We actually had someone pass away, someone who was a member of our church,
Yeah.
just a close, family, relative, friend, daughter.
Yeah.
So different things that have happened. And so kind of just talk to us a little bit. What was that like?
Yeah.
I know you got the phone call, and just kind of take us from there. What happened?
Yeah, completely unexpected. I would say 7 years as a church, by God's grace, we haven't had anyone pass away. And in my mind, I was thinking maybe somebody older, but yet it was a peer, a friend of ours who went to school with, same age. So it kind of rocked me personally. And so what we're talking about today is like, how do you grieve through that?
Yeah.
Like, how do you grieve as a church, as a leader? And we're going to talk about that. So obviously, whether it was the podcast or certain things that we had set up in our church to celebrate, things got changed a little bit. And so we just want to really give you behind the sneak peek of just the whole process of leading a church through that.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a little bit different today. We're going to be a little bit short, but we're just going to talk about really grieving in the church and what that looks like.
For sure. And so, I know you got the call, and obviously it was shocking. And I think that day, we had a youth event that day that we were at, and we had a lot of things planned. And so we had the podcast that was coming that week.
Dream Team Night. We're supposed to celebrate about Easter.
Yeah, it's sermon series that we were in the middle of. Worship sets that we were planning, and we were excited and getting ready to do a lot of things. But kind of had to put that stuff on pause. Yeah. And obviously the initial shock was a lot. So what was it like to have to change the plans from what we had originally intended to do to kind of help our church begin the grieving process? Because it was a close family, friend, relative to a lot of the people that were in our congregation. So it hit home.
Yeah. So we just got done talking about financial fitness. I was in the middle of a financial fitness series. So the first thing I wrestled with, do you continue the series or do you change, something else?
Right.
And so, and the person who passed away, she was the one who was over our benevolence program. So in other words, the person who took care of funeral arrangements and those different things. So, it was day by day trying to figure out what to do. I don't think there's a manual or a playbook. I just knew at the same time, I think this was the balance, and we talked about this, grieving, but we don't grieve like the world.
Yeah.
So we want to be sensitive to grief. Our whole, church was grieving, but we didn't want to just stay there, because our hope in Christ is that she's in a better place, and then one day we'll be reunited. And so, but we had to talk about song choices. We had to talk about what we're speaking about. We had to talk about our Dream Team Night was changed, just different language that we were using. And so, so we had to go through that whole process. Yeah. So we haven't mastered it, but what I've learned, here's the biggest thing I would say is, how do you grieve as a pastor, as a leader of a church? Or how do you lead people through grief? Yeah. And I do think I learned something. You grieve with people.
Yeah, 100%.
You grieve with people. And you were there at service. We had just a service where I think God honored us. He knew what we needed at that time. Yeah. It was probably one of the most where I just felt the presence of God in a tangible way. Yeah. And it was a moment where I was like, get off the stage.
Got to get off the stage.
We standing on holy ground. Yeah. It was seriously, at that point, I realized we didn't need anyone on stage. Worship was going forward. It was like God's glory just came into place because he knew exactly what we needed as a church.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that really came from, a lot of people, whenever grief happens, they tend to act like it's not there. They just try and push it under the cover, sweep it under the carpet,
Yeah.
and then just kind of try and walk through it. And I think that we decided, you know, as a team, as a church, like we're not going to act like this didn't happen, right? We're not just going to take this and just keep on moving to the next big event. Like we're actually going to take some time and like grieve, like you said, with our church, with our congregation. That's actually what happened. I mean, we were laid out. I mean, the Holy Spirit came because, like you said, I think he really knew like what we needed on that day.
Yeah, that's called spiritual bypassing. Shameless plug. We preaching on that, where we use faith as a mechanism not to deal with reality. That's coming soon. Anyway, spiritual bypassing. Yeah, there was a moment during our first service. You know, I was rocked, to be honest with you. I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
But I think tending to the needs of other people, I didn't necessarily have a chance to grieve. So first service was over. I'm like, I'm good. I got it out of my system.
Yeah.
It was even worse the second service,
for sure.
man.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I was going to get through the message. But again, it's not about me. What I'm saying is, how do you grieve as a church? How do you grieve as a person? You just grieve, and everybody grieves differently. And so that's kind of what we were walking our church through. We're still kind of walking through that, but also celebrating a life well lived. I think is important as well. And that was my first funeral so I've done 4 funerals. First funeral was someone that I actually knew. So it just hit different. And so still even trying to think about it even now, but it was like a long 2 weeks in terms of like processing. Am I leading our church well? I'm grieving at the same time. Am I saying the right things, saying the right words? But I will say, man, shout out to Crossover Church. I think we did a great job loving on people. We always talk about loving people in a practical way, or showing the love of Jesus in a practical way. And I think we did that because the Repass was at our church. And so just people in our church really stepped up. And I do believe it's brought us closer as a church, that you can just feel that as well.
For sure. So obviously this was the first, death that we've had in our church. And we had the funeral, and I mean, Crossover showed up and showed out. I mean, they were all there, packed, standing room only. And then we had the Repass at our church. So it kind of just felt like, we were a little more like official, like we kind of like took another step in maturity as a church, as a ministry. So can you talk about that a little bit, just kind of like what you saw like from the people who were serving? Because I mean, there are people who serve once or twice. I mean, they were there and they were hands on deck, like.
Well, we've always been a church, but I've had mentors of the pastors say you really have not been an official church until you do that. And now I understand what it means in terms of being there when someone gives birth to a baby, but also being there when someone passes away. Right. And that's life.
Man.
And so one of the things I was thankful that we had an opportunity to be there and not be portable, because if we were portable, we wouldn't be able to do anything. So I'm just grateful that we did have a building. But man, it was awesome just to see the people of God come, because man, not everyone at the funeral or at the Repass knows Jesus.
Right.
But we have an opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And for me personally, having an opportunity to do the eulogy just in front of other classmates, and man, I was nervous. I typically don't get too nervous before, preaching, but that was a time. And then, man, just the spiritual warfare that came with that, man, I was getting these massive like headaches and even before then, but I just had to pray at that moment, God, like the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is the same power in me right now. And I think it went well. I think people were impacted by the message. And so it's definitely a life well lived. But also, too, as a church, just being able to come alongside and creating a memorial fund in her name, and being able to come and get resources for her family's future. And so I'm proud about that as well.
Man, that's so awesome. One thing you say all the time is that whenever there's a move of God, there's always a move of the enemy at the same time. And I think we experienced that. I mean, I know there were some like spiritual attacks that you were kind of facing. I mean, for me, even my wife, like there were just some things, like it was kind of a hard 2 weeks, 4 weeks that we kind of walked through. So can you kind of talk about that? Like, what was that like fighting that, life, because it was just life, fighting, grief at the same time, as well as like feeling the weight and the loss from our entire church community, like as a pastor?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a weight. Definitely dealing with, spiritual. I had, a panic attack at one point, which I don't get. I really don't get anxiety. I mean, even in the moment, every time I went over her family's house to discuss the matters, I was getting these just massive headaches. So then I knew what time it was. I'm literally at the eulogy. It was happening again. And I just had to get to a point, stop complaining. I got to start praying, and God honored that as well. But then also too, man, giving people opportunities to grieve, even in church. We had our dream team night as well. Yeah. And I think sometimes, well, for me, it would have just been awkward. We just keep going, moving forward, right. you know? Yeah. And so I literally had to pray about, God, do you want me to preach something different? We're in this money series, but I do think, you know, God was telling me to press forward because of our resources that we brought in as a church. This is what money does. Man. It can make an impact in people's lives and her life with her kids. And so we kept moving forward in that way, but we changed worship up a little bit. But God he just came in the room, and we always talk about having an expectation with no agenda. Yeah, and definitely met us there.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we had that day. I mean, it was awesome. I mean, I just remember being there, and I just remember like just being tapped in like spiritually and just kind of feeling the weight, you know, of the grief. So I didn't personally know her like super well, but I think one of the things that I've learned from the experience is that you don't always have to, you know the person who passed away for you to be grieving in the community. Yeah. You know, like I was able to talk to people. I was able to hear the different stories about her. I was able to, you know, have those conversations and help our community grieve from stage and off stage. And so even as a leader, like it's not always, you know, having to be in the situation, but the Bible says it pretty clearly, like weep with those who weep. And I think that's what we did. Yeah. And I believe that our community is, like you said, more strong, like more tight knit. Because of that, So it was really good. So man, it was a kind of a crazy time. I mean, we walked through all of that. We had the repass, and I think the best thing that we kind of had the conversation about, you're asking, so, you know, my dad passed away not too long ago, and you kind of asked that question, like, what was the one thing that you kind of wish people would have done differently? Yeah. And I said, there are always people who are there at the beginning. Like, whenever, you know, the actual passing away happens, the funeral, the repass, there's always somebody there, you know, calling you, texting you. Yeah. That's probably the time where you don't want anybody calling you, texting you, because I'm trying to grieve, you know, and figure it out. And you ask, like, what would you want people to do differently? And I think it's really being there on the back end, like, you know, a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months after it happens, nobody's even thinking about you anymore. Like they're off doing their own thing, but you're still left with the loss, and now you're by yourself. And so I think that's kind of, you know, where the fun came in. And so can you talk about that a little bit, just the thought process behind it?
Yeah, I would say even this morning during our podcast, I got a text from the family. Yeah. Like during this recording, got a text from the family. So continuing those conversations as well. But let me say this, I was at a funeral a while back, and I think it's so important that the minister there had good intentions, but didn't let people grieve. And I just remember that. What's wrong with y'all? Yeah. Why y'all grieving? They in heaven. Yeah. Dude, mourn with those who mourn. Yep. Like, get in it with them. We understand that.
For sure.
But the reality is, what I'm learning is this: pain is a gift.
Wow.
It's a gift. The grief you feel is a gift. Why? The pain shows you how much you love someone. Yeah. There's some people whose parents die, they don't even shed a tear. Yeah. There's no pain. But the pain is a gift. So the more pain you feel, even if you're grieving 10, 15 years from now, it's a gift because it's a reminder of how much you love that person. Yeah. Right? And so for me, man, I was grieving because it was that reality of like, man, honestly, and I know any day it can be me, but like I really felt it. Like it could be me. Yeah. Same age, known her for a long time. And so I just wanted to be sensitive to the family at the same time. And what do you do? Like the hardest conversations for me is when you walk in the door. Yeah. That's hard.
Man. And so now you're sitting there. I mean, you guys are about to plan the funeral, like where to go, how to do it. Like, walk me through that conversation, because I mean, that's kind of an intimidating place to be, you know?
It's the ministry of shut up and sit down. This is the worst you can do. Listen, this is so important. Don't come in there and say, well, there's a reason for everything. Yeah. God has a plan. Yeah. God. What I'm doing right now, you just say, I'm here, shut up, and sit down. Yeah. I don't say too much unless you ask me a question. Yeah. Now, I mean, one thing you can say as far as sharing memories, hey, what's a memory? What's a... You know, so I think from a eulogy standpoint, that's important as well. What's something that person did that made you laugh? What did they enjoy doing? Yeah. And so at the same time they're grieving, you can get the family kind of smiling and those different things. Yeah. But other than that, it's sit down and shut up. And I'll just say another thing. I remember a few years ago, I went to this funeral and like I was there, I was dressed nice and, you know, but I saw this dude come in. He had the clergy collar on and everything. And immediately his attire showed that the pastor was here. And for me, that was like, okay, if I'm ever in a situation, and I don't never dress up like that, I might preach on this, but it showed me something in terms of identification. Someone told me, it was like, man, you didn't look approachable at the funeral. And what I said was, I wasn't trying to look approachable. I was trying to look identifiable. So when I walked in the building, they knew who was speaking, and
100%.
it brings a sense of calmness
sense of peace
to the family.
sure.
Plus, to me, if you know I don't dress up in that garb and you see it, you know it's a holy moment. It's a special moment that I'm not there to play. And so for me, it was a place of showing reverence. But I realized, man, I really started to realize just the call, the position that I have. Because for me, honestly, I'm Ken. It don't Pastor Ken, it don't matter. But for me, that was a moment of like, no, this is a calling.
Yeah.
This is a sacred calling. And so I just hope that we honor the family well. And I believe we did because they let us know.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, going from here, I mean, like, what are the next steps for our church, like our community? I mean, and moving forward, I mean, if, you know, possibly another funeral happens, or even just like a next step of maturity for our church, like for our community, in your eyes, what would that be?
That's a very good question. I think, number one, honoring the person, honoring the family is important too. Letting your church grieve. I think every situation is different. So although you can have a template, a rubric, every situation is different.
For sure.
Because if we just have a template, this is where we follow step 1, step 2, step 3, you're missing grieving and being in it.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, so it's like, I realize I'm just going to be in it.
Yeah.
You know, God might go this way, he might go this way. Honoring the family, continuing to communicate with the family even afterwards.
Yeah.
But literally like entering into the grief with the family. Obviously, it's a different grief level.
Yeah.
But you never want to get to the point where it's like you go into the house like you selling windows or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. For
you know, like I'm here with you. I'm grieving with you. I'm here. And I think that's the most important thing. So I wouldn't say there's a template, but now I would just say if there's anything, I think we stepped in it.
Yeah.
You know, with the family and with our congregation.
Yeah, big time. And I mean, I'm just proud of our church. Like, I'm really proud. I know a lot of you guys watch this, and so I want to say I'm proud of you guys for how you guys served at the funeral, for how you guys served at the Repass. I mean, we were pulling out extra tables. I mean, we were taking the trays off. Like, we were serving. Like, we did that thing. And I really do think, like, we were able to honor the family. We were able to honor her legacy. And so, yeah, man. I mean, moving forward, I think, like you said, we'll just continue to do so. And we'll do that.
All right. Well, listen, we know this is a little bit different podcast, which just wanted to give you a sneak peek behind the scenes of, man, what goes on at Crossover Church, how we grieve with those different things. And at the same time, we want to grieve with those who are grieving, mourn with those who are mourning, but also rejoicing with those who rejoice. And so at the same time, went from taking a church to grief through celebration, understanding that when we pass away, we're in heaven celebrating that we're with the Father, that we're with the King. And so it's a balance, but I think we did that pretty decently.
For sure, man. Well, we appreciate you guys for jumping on with us. Again, remember, if you guys are watching this, if you've been rocking with us for this long, you should be subscribed by now. So make sure to subscribe. Hit that notification bell so that you guys don't miss whenever we upload a video, okay? We appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time.
All right, we'll see you.
Peace.